Hi, I'm Alan from Sustainable Life. Today I'm going to show you our lovely woods at 10 acres and some of the nice trees we've got there. At this time of year, it's spring and the trees are only just coming into leaf. So some of the bigger trees, the leaves aren't fully out yet, and that makes them really hard to ID, just for a few weeks. It's called spring ident. It's like a legendary thing. Only proper experts can do it. But this tree, this field maple here, this is already out. So let's have a look at this one. So this is it's a big tree. It's part of the maple family, so things like Norway maple, Japanese maple and so on. But this is our only native version. People think the sycamore is native. It isn't. So it's got this smallish for a maple leaf. Like all maples, buds in pairs here, leaves in pairs on the stem. You've got this winged seed, unusually small, on the field maple. Now, this one doesn't have any, but maybe if I get the chance later on, I'll show you that sometimes on a field maple, quite commonly, the bark here forms this weird corky kind of star that goes around the bark, so that if you were to cut it that way, you'd have a star at the front. But this one doesn't have any. There are some lovely examples on the path in a little way down. Come on. This is Hazel. Now, Hazel is one of our most important forestry trees. It's been around since the Ice Age. It's a native. It likes to stay under other trees, particularly oak. And traditionally in forestry, what people have done is they have farmed it in 12 patches, and they've rotated it one patch a year. So you've got a patch of hazel at every stage of development. And the reason they do that is so that obviously they have a harvest every year. But the advantage of that is that you have a habitat for every different type of wildlife. So that's a fantastic native tree for the diversity and for habitat. What's it used for? Well, lovely long straight sticks used for fencing and wattle and daub huts. And the big use has been charcoal historically. You stack it up, and obviously because it's straight, there's very little oxygen gets in between. Pile the earth over, smoulder it, make charcoal. Apparently chewing the bark makes for a good Stone Age toothbrush, although it's not something I've ever tried over a long time. Obviously the hazelnuts, although nowadays the grey squirrels get them before I ever do. I never see them anymore. And you can carve it. I generally don't carve this one. I normally carve sycamore, but it can be carved pretty well. And a bow drill if you're going to make fire. Bow drill, your board and your drill. Obviously, because it's nice and straight, makes a great drill and also a great board. And obviously inside there you'll nearly always, although not here because we use it so much, but you'll nearly always find a long straight length inside. So hazel, great tree. The leaves are pretty distinctive. They have this feel. They're not smooth or shiny. They're quite papery in feel. And their shape is, I suppose it's not that distinctive, but the kind of slight roundness to it. The bud is green. It's obviously out of bud now. Now it's just come out into leaf in spring. But the main thing is the bark, the multiple stems, the obvious lenticels on the bark that you can see, especially on the younger growth, and the fact that it's always happy underneath of the trees. That's, it's pretty easy when you get into the swing of it to spot a hazel. This is an elder. Quite like elder. It's a pretty useful tree for a number of reasons. Obviously elderflower, which most of you will know about. Elderberry has ridiculously high vitamin and nutrient content. Great for your immune system. I'm told there's now quite solid research on the fact that that's an immune boosting antiviral. So elderberries are pretty cool. You get jelly ears on the elder, we might see some of them in a little bit. I wanted to show you the whole tree before I looked at the leaves or the buds or anything. Obviously that's ivy, but the shape of the tree. It's very sort of tangly and messy, has this kind of corky, messy looking bark. It's another, like hazel, it's an understory tree. It's usually under other trees. And so it's fairly easy to identify without even knowing what the leaves look like. Now, it's often used as a hand drill wood, this one. I've never done that. But what I do a lot of the time is I use these twigs here, these dead twigs that you often find at the bottom of the tree because it's so dark on the ground. Now those twigs are quite hollow and pithy inside, and that means they're full of air and they act like a little chimney, so they are great for kindling for a fire. Here we've got a younger elder tree, Bambucus nigra, and you can see that the leaves, you've got these 5 leaflets on the leaf. That's pretty common. That's what it's, they don't all look exactly like that, but that's the look it's going for. This leaf is slightly bigger because of its position on the tree. It's at a point of damage. That's called epicormic growth. So this is the normal size leaf here. See, it's quite bendy, so let's bring them round. So this is epicormic growth. Branch has been cut, it's damaged, and that produces these big leaves because the tree thinks, oh no, I'm damaged, I need more light, I need to fix myself, get more energy. So that's what that does. This is a normal healthy leaf. It's a lot smaller, but exactly the same shape. And can you see on the twig this really kind of pronounced sort of shape? I don't know what you call that. Stomata again, is it? I don't know. But yeah, they're lenticels, sorry, so they're good. Very clear, easy to see. You've got this wide spacing, buds in pairs like a maple, but quite different in the way the twig looks. Wide spacing in between them again, and fairly kind of inside the tree you'll often find these long straight lengths, not as straight as hazel, but that's because this is something trees do when they're reaching up for the light in a dark place. They just shoot up straight in the air, so you get a lot of that too. And then the mess, the tangle, which is the key feature.
It's golden weeping willow. I've been told I have to be loud because of the noise of the river. Salix babylonica, willow of Babylon. Apparently because it could be found in the hanging gardens of Babylon, which were legendarily beautiful. Now, willow is, there's a lot of willows in England. There's a whole bunch. This one isn't native. There is a native weeping willow, but it's not golden. Most willows, not all, have a long narrow leaf like this. You have the leaves come out in slightly staggered pairs like that, and I mean, beyond that it's hard to say what the key identification features are because they vary across the trees. On this tree it's the golden twigs, very easy to see the golden twigs, and the bark of willows is quite distinctive. A lot of the time it's a kind of rough, kind of busy bark over there. So willow is, I'm a bit nearer now so I can shout a little less. Willow is one of the trees from which salicylic acid or aspirin is derived. So if you were living in the medieval period and you needed aspirin, you would actually need willow bark, and what you'd do is you'd peel off the bark, and on the inside of that bark you'd have like pink inner bark, and you would take that off and you would dry it if you had time, and then you would grind it up and use about a teaspoon in your hot drink, and that would be your aspirin equivalent for the medieval period. And someone isolated that ingredient 100 or 2 years ago, and they turned it into the modern day aspirin. That comes from this tree. Some willows have more than others. I don't know the specific aspirin contents of each willow, but you probably shouldn't be practicing that till you know more anyway, so don't do that in a hurry. What else is willow good for? I usually use goat willow to make rope. You use the inner bark of long straight twigs, and you can twist that into rope pretty easily, and that's commonly done. Beyond that, what can you say about willow? It's a ridiculously quick growing tree. It's very common. Willows are very common in the site because they love water so much. They have really strong mycorrhizal relationships, so they have fungi in their roots that allow them to take nutrients from even really wet soil, which is why they colonize rivers and so on really easily. Yeah, and they're a lovely tree. I do love a good willow.
This one is a birch. Love birch. Birch are wonderful. For me, the main use of the birch is the fact that the bark is basically flammable. The thin, papery strips of bark, it doesn't hurt the tree to take these off. And they're full of an oil which is highly flammable, and they will take a spark even when wet. I put them in a pocket to dry them out. It does make it easier, but this is fire lighting material basically all year, anytime, in any deciduous forest, and that's excellent. Other uses, the bark of the twigs is actually, it's pretty waterproof. The bark, it's the same, obviously the same as this bark here. So the twigs are coated in this bark, which keeps the water out and means that they dry very well on the tree. So you light the tree with this bark, and then you use the twigs as your kindling to catch a flame. And even in heavy, wet, horrid conditions, you can make a fantastic fire really easily, as long as you have a birch tree around. So that's great. Also, they make fantastic sap. You can use the sap. Birch water, people tap the bark. I really hate that. You don't need to tap the bark. You can get just as much from cutting the end off a twig and sticking the bottle over the end of the branch. But that sap, it's a very pure water. You can even get it out of a bog or whatever. And the tree could be in a swamp and it would still produce really excellent pure water, even with a mild sugar content, which also helps keep you alive if you ever need that kind of thing. So you can only do this before the leaves plant in the spring, so you're looking at kind of March time. The leaves are pretty distinctive. There are two types of native birch. So one has a slightly bigger and more smooth, a non-toothy leaf, but that's the most common type. It's pretty distinctive spade shape, and the twig is also sort of fairly distinctive. This small kind of brown green buds that you get. I don't find it a difficult tree though to ID, because really the bark is really white, and that's really not that common. So yeah, pretty easy tree to spot, pretty useful tree, native, fantastic for the birds and all the sort of insects, because it's all native trees. They're fantastic for biodiversity and habitat. So this is one of my favourite trees from a bushcraft point of view, but also just because it's pretty, and that's good too.